was that a deal's not a deal until it's a deal. And I think that's interesting to extrapolate that to all of sales, because I think those of us that are in the game of sales are almost universally inherently optimistic. Like, we believe that there's a path. We believe through the power of conversation, persuasion, personality, that we can go out to market and connect people with the products and services that they want and need, or that they otherwise didn't realize they want and need, but that we can do that. And so we tend to overestimate, like, yeah, no, this deal is really trending. I think we're going to get it this month, right? And I've done that a million times. And in this case, it was like, I think we're going to get this deal like within the next week. Like, surely they'll sign it, and then maybe it'll take a few more days to get the wire into the account. But otherwise, I mean, they just said yes on the phone. We all heard them. But going back, knowing what we know now, we were actually farther than we thought from the deal. In hindsight, it was a good opportunity to cut our teeth on that process a little bit. At the time, though, it was extremely frustrating, because especially as an early startup, and we're still largely this way, like, we like everything to move really fast. If we have an idea, we just want to implement it that day. And so it was an exercise in patience, which is not my strong suit, and in my experience so far, not particularly a strong suit of any entrepreneur. Telling people, like, hey, just be patient, is usually not in the mentality or the vocabulary of those of us that pursue, sales or entrepreneurship as a vocation. Part of my family is from Omaha, and so we like to follow Warren Buffett. In one of the interviews he gave, they said, well, what's the most important trait that you think has helped lead to your success as probably the most successful investor of all time? And I think people expected him to say ability to take a risk, perseverance, raw intelligence, right? He's famous for being one of the smartest people in the world. But instead, he answered emotional stability. What an interesting answer, right? Mm-hmm. Especially in sales, where, one moment you're being told no, and it's this crushing defeat like you described in our case. But then the next moment, you may get the yes that you've been working on for 6 months or a year and a half, right? Depending on the sales cycle. And so it's getting used to riding that wave. I'm from Southern California too, so we're all surfers, but it's kind of getting used to getting pummeled and your face in the sand for a little while, and then the next thing you know, you're back up again and you're cruising down the beach and having a great time. So it's being able to weather that, and I think that is, like you say, you have to practice that a lot. I don't know that many people that are just like, oh, I heard no, like it's no big deal, brush it off. For most of us, that's going to be a bad day or a bad week or maybe even a bad month before we kind of get ourselves out of that funk and get back in the game and sell again. And I think this is true probably for any company. Like, the most important thing that we have going for us is the people, right? We get to, and this is one of the lucky things about entrepreneurs, we get to choose the people we work with. So we've been able to assemble and hire on just a great group of folks to comprise the Cirrus Insight team. I think then, as a result, those are the highs, because you have all these great people doing awesome things around you and it helps grow the company. But the lows then are related to when people leave or things don't work out, because those are personal relationships and it also impacts the business. Those in a lot of ways are harder than the ones where people will pinpoint a reason why they can't, right? Like, well, we would love to do it, except you're missing this key thing. And that's, we can't argue that. We say, well, yeah, I can try to get value out of everything else. Maybe we'll add that thing later, et cetera. But if they say we have to have, this is a requirement, you don't have it yet, we got to go somewhere else. That's extremely understandable and logical. The one where people just say, everything is perfect, except we just can't. So it's one of those, well, it's not you, it's us. Those are hard ones, just like in relationships, right? Where it's like, no, I'd much rather have a reason that this isn't going to work out. I don't want to just be like, oh, let's just not do it anymore. To the extent that you really feel like you've got your head down and you're working hard on something, then unless you're just on a flyer and it's totally the wrong thing, then that really hard work will likely translate into a future differentiator. Doesn't feel like it at the time, though. And I know there's plenty of things now that we're working on where it's like, geez, I hope this works out. But I think more often than not, if you're really, really working something, then chances are you're going to put some space between you and the next vendor or the next entrepreneur that maybe hasn't figured out that they even need to spend time on that, most likely, or that they did, but they weren't willing to put in that time that you have. And that creates that space in the market where hopefully you can win some deals. The best decision Ryan and I made was about 7 years ago, and it was simply to launch. And you would think, well, of course, that was the idea, right? Just to launch the business. It's easy to convince ourselves, especially in a market where there's a lot of people out there now. There's a lot of really smart people. There's a lot of people doing the same thing that you're probably planning to do. They probably registered all the domains already, et cetera, et cetera. There's all these barriers to like, should I actually do this? Does this really make sense? Arguably the best way to find out is, analysis paralysis. You should do your research, right? I'm not saying, go jump in the pool without checking if there's water in it first, but it's simply to say, hey, you can compete it out. You can execute. You don't necessarily have to have everything just laid out perfectly. All your vendors are identified and legal's taken care of perfectly, and you got a CPA lined up. It's probably too early for all that. You just need to jump in and start.